Hello, hello. I want to talk to you today about beliefs and beliefs in your relationship, about how what we think about, we bring about. And it's as true in our relationships as it is any other aspect of our life. And I want to share with you something that I thought about yesterday. I ran a half marathon yesterday, something that I'd planned to do 4 years ago. Then a certain thing like a global pandemic got in the way. And I'd forgotten I'd actually registered for this half marathon until I got a reminder email 10 weeks ago. I've had 10 weeks of doubt, 10 weeks of believing that I couldn't do it, I wasn't going to do it, I wasn't fast enough, it wasn't going to be as good as the previous half marathon I ran. And guess what? I came in a little bit slower. My mind absolutely was the reason why the half marathon I did yesterday wasn't as fast as my previous one. And I want to share with you what happened, and then we'll talk about our beliefs in relationships. Because I've done my training for the half marathon, I've been out there, I've been pounding the pavements, running along sand, doing my reps, doing my hill training to make sure I got my speed up, I got my stamina up, and that I was capable of running on whatever terrain I happened to have to run on yesterday. But I also knew that from running my first half marathon a number of years ago, that mile 10 was going to cause me a problem. I was born with dislocated hips. It means I have a problem with my piriformis muscle if I run significant distance. So I've spent a lot of time strengthening that particular muscle to make sure I could go the distance of a half marathon. And I knew I could do it. Pretty much done it in training. But what happened was when the starting pistol went off, when I crossed that start line, I ran with the crowd. I knew that I was running a fairly fast pace to start with. And that was fine. It was comfortable. I was comfortable. I was really enjoying it. And I was looking forward to doing quite a quick half marathon for me. Got to about halfway, and we're talking about mile 6. And there was some beautiful scenery. And I got my phone out of my little pouch, my little bum bag that I run with, and decided to take a photograph of the scenery as I was running. I took the photograph, but as I put my phone away, I noticed what my average time per mile was. It was significantly faster than I was used to running. Up until that point, I hadn't had any evidence that I was running faster, other than a feeling that I was running faster than normal. The moment I saw that evidence was the moment that my mind kicked in. All the doubts I had, all the beliefs I had about not being a runner, all the beliefs I had about not being able to run that fast kicked in big time. I got about a mile further on and I started worrying that I wasn't going to make it to the end. I felt weak. I thought I needed some sugar. I was grateful for the jelly babies and gummy bears that were being handed out by spectators along the route. And I really was concerned that I wasn't going to get over the finish line. Then I hit mile 10. Now, mile 10 is where in my first half marathon, I ended up in absolute agony. That's when my piriformis muscle gave up, my hips gave up, and I stumbled the last 3 miles, gritting my teeth, in tears, and just praying that I got over the finish line. So yesterday, I hit mile 10, and it triggered all of the same sorts of responses. Once again, my mind came in and started telling me it's at mile 10. Are you in pain? How are your hips? Can you finish this? Can you walk properly? And I did that check-in with my body. I checked, are my feet okay? Yes, my feet were okay. Are my knees okay? My knees were okay. How are your hips? Now, the reality is my hips were feeling fine, but I told myself I needed to be careful because my hips were causing me a problem. The last 3 miles weren't as tough as the last 3 miles in the previous half marathon, but they were tough. At one stage, I decided that I needed to walk. The thing is, walking was so painful, it was less painful for me to carry on running. So I carried on running. I got over the finish line. The last mile of the half marathon, I did through gritted teeth. Now, I did it through gritted teeth because I had talked myself into believing that those last 3 miles of that half marathon were a struggle. I had talked myself into believing that I was going to have problems with my hips. I talked myself into believing that I'm not a runner. Ironically, my recovery has been incredibly quick. Aside for a few little aches and pains today and having to get up and walk around perhaps every hour just to make sure I keep everything moving, I'm feeling really good. Far better than the last half marathon. I've got over it quicker. I'm actually going out for a run tomorrow morning. I always run on a Tuesday morning, and I'm doing that again tomorrow. I've already identified the next half marathons I want to run. So that tells me that I am a runner. I can run, and my hips will sustain me. So what's that got to do with beliefs in relationships? Well, when we're in a relationship, we have beliefs that we hold up for ourselves or that we project onto our partner. I want to share you some examples from my own relationships. My first husband believed that the way to keep a woman, keep a wife, was to beat her into submission. He beat me. I stayed for probably another 18 months after the first time he beat me up. I stayed because I was too scared to leave. I stayed because I didn't believe I could do any better. So guess what? I stayed where I was because I believed that's what I deserved. When I finally had the courage to leave him, I then met the person who was going to become my second husband. Now, there were a lot of red flags in the beginning of that relationship. And in fact, we actually split up before we got married. We got back together because, once again, I didn't believe I deserved any better. He didn't beat me like my first husband did. And actually, he always told me I should be grateful that he didn't beat me like my first husband did. But the way he treated me wasn't good. Yet I constantly believed what I now know was his gaslighting, his lies, his abuse. And I believed that's what I deserved. And I was grateful because I wasn't being physically beaten up, but I was being emotionally, mentally beaten up. When I finally left him, my next long-term relationship, my third abusive relationship, was with somebody who believed that I was too good for him, who believed that I was going to leave him, who believed that I would find somebody better. Guess what happened? He became so suffocating, as well as financially controlling, to make sure he kept me there. The relationship became so suffocating that I did leave him. I wasn't happy in that relationship, so I eventually left. Now, those are very, very potted scenarios, potted histories of those relationships. And of course, as with any relationship, there is much more that goes on there. But equally, I had my part to play. I believed that I needed to marry the person I was with when I was 16 years old. I believed that because my parents had met when they were 16. And I believe that's what made a long-term marriage successful. Now, of course, now I'm so much older, now I have so much more experience. And I absolutely recognize that that belief was my interpretation of my parents' relationship. I also believed that a man had to be in control. Again, not because my parents were or my father was controlling, but because my mother always deferred to my father. They were a very, very traditional 1970s relationship where mum stayed at home and looked after the children. Dad went out to work. Dad would give mum the housekeeping at the end of every week. And whenever there were big decisions to be made in the family, mum would say, "We'll ask your father about that. What does your dad have to say?" So my beliefs were instilled at a very young age about what made a successful relationship. And I then spent my adult life looking for those beliefs to be upheld, looking for the evidence that told me those beliefs were real. That led me to choosing the wrong people to have long-term relationships with at the time, but it also led me on the path to what I do now. And I'm really interested to know what beliefs you hold about your relationship, what beliefs aren't serving you about your relationship, because mine certainly didn't serve me. And what beliefs can you change, or do you want to change about your relationship? If any of them come to mind, please share them with me in the comments or get in touch. You can get hold of me on any social media, Deb Morgan Coach. Just send me a DM or pop something in the comments below this video. I look forward to finding out what your beliefs are, and I will catch up with you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining me.